Ethan Walsh never understood why his friend Mason always said, "My uncle's house, it has its own personality." It sounded like one of those poetic things people say about old buildings, but the moment Ethan stepped inside that two-story wooden house on the quiet edge of Willow Creek, he realized Mason wasn't exaggerating. The place felt warm, lived in, strangely comforting, as if the walls themselves remembered every person who ever laughed or cried inside them. The air smelled like cedar and cinnamon, something familiar Ethan couldn't quite place. Maybe that's why he kept visiting, or maybe, without realizing it, he liked the way someone in this house looked at him. Someone older. Someone who seemed to notice things everyone else ignored. Someone named Caleb Hart, Mason's uncle. Caleb was in his mid-30s but carried himself like someone who'd already lived a long, complicated life. Soft dark hair, quiet eyes, a calm voice that always sounded warm no matter the sentence. Ethan had met him 3 times before today, but something about this visit felt different from the moment Caleb opened the door. "Oh, Ethan," Caleb said, expression softening just a little more than usual. "Didn't know you were coming with Mason today." Ethan smiled, brushing a hand through his hair. "Hope that's okay." "It's more than okay." Caleb stepped aside to let him in, his gaze lingering for a second longer than necessary. "You're always welcome here." Ethan didn't think much of it. He was used to people liking him. He'd always had one of those faces people trusted instinctively. He was friendly, polite, and had an easy smile. What he didn't know, what he had absolutely no clue about, was that Caleb saw him differently. Not like a kid visiting with a friend. Not like a neighbor. Something else. Something quieter, deeper, slower. They all sat together in the living room, Mason on the floor with a video game controller, Ethan beside him on the couch, and Caleb in an armchair near the window. The sun was setting behind him, outlining his figure like a painting. Ethan caught him looking over a few times, but Caleb always looked away quickly, pretending to focus on a book or his cup of tea. At one point Ethan turned and caught Caleb mid-stare. Caleb blinked, slightly embarrassed. "Sorry," he said softly. "You just have a kind face." Ethan laughed lightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," Caleb said with a small, genuine smile, "you're the kind of person people feel safe around." The compliment warmed Ethan's chest more than it should have. "Well, thanks." Mason was too busy shouting at the game to pay attention. Good thing, because the air between Ethan and Caleb changed. Something unspoken settled between them, confusing for Ethan but strangely comforting at the same time. After dinner, Mason said he needed to run home for a bit, something about picking up a charger he forgot. "I'll be back in an hour," he called before leaving. Ethan was left in the quiet house with Caleb. For the first 5 minutes neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward though, it was thick, charged in a way Ethan didn't have words for. Caleb walked into the kitchen, filled 2 glasses with cold water and brought one to the couch. "You okay being here alone with me?" Caleb asked, voice light, almost joking, but his eyes said something deeper. Ethan took the glass. "Why wouldn't I be?" Caleb hesitated, then sat beside him. Not too close, but close enough. People your age don't usually enjoy quiet homes. Or quiet company. Ethan smiled slowly. "I don't mind quiet." Caleb's gaze softened again. "You really are a gentle soul." There was again, Ethan thought. The way Caleb said things made them feel heavier, more meaningful. Like each word had an echo. "Ethan," Caleb said suddenly, lightly touching Ethan's sleeve, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you trust me?" Ethan blinked. "Of course." Caleb nodded, exhaling like he'd been holding that question inside for a long time. "Good. Because I want to tell you something. Something I've never said to you directly." Ethan leaned in slightly, curiosity bright in his eyes. Caleb's voice lowered. "I think you're special. More than you realize." Ethan's breath caught. Not because it was romantic, he didn't even know what it meant, but because of the sincerity in Caleb's tone. "I don't know why," Caleb continued, fingers brushing the edge of his glass, "but whenever you're in this house, the world feels lighter." Ethan didn't know how to respond. No one ever said things like that to him. He started, but footsteps sounded outside. Mason was back already, breaking the spell. Caleb pulled back slightly, shoulders tightening as if he'd said too much. Mason burst into the living room. "Found my charger. Ethan, stay over tonight. It'll be fun." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Caleb unconsciously. Caleb's expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes whispered stay. "Sure," Ethan said. "I'll stay." Later that night, as they prepared extra blankets and dimmed the lights, Ethan felt Caleb watching him again, gentle but intense. Something was shifting. Something real. something neither of them was ready to name yet. Ethan had never been the kind of person who overthought compliments. He heard them often, from teachers, from strangers, from older neighbors who adored his polite manners. But the compliment Caleb gave him earlier, the soft, "You're special. The world feels lighter when you're here," echoed in his mind long after Mason had fallen asleep on the floor beside him. The house was dim, quiet except for the soft ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Ethan lay on the couch with a blanket, staring at the ceiling, letting his thoughts loop in circles. Why did it feel different when he said it? Why did it feel so personal? Caleb's voice had held something gentle, something tender. Ethan wasn't naive. He knew when someone admired him, but this felt deeper. More careful. Respectful. As if Caleb was holding back 1,000 other things he wanted to say. Unable to sleep, Ethan sat up and tossed the blanket aside. The hallway light was on, dim, golden, like someone left it for him. He walked slowly, quietly, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Caleb's door was slightly open. Not enough to be an invitation, but not closed either. Inside, a warm lamp glowed, casting a soft circle of light against the floor. Ethan hesitated, then lightly tapped the frame. "Caleb," he whispered. The door creaked open another inch. Caleb looked up from a book, surprised but not startled. He wore a simple gray t-shirt, his hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hand through it too often. "Couldn't sleep?" Caleb asked softly. Ethan shook his head, leaning against the doorframe. "Not really." Caleb set his book aside. "Night can be heavy sometimes." Ethan stepped inside before he even processed why he wanted to. The room smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, like him. It felt safe in a way Ethan didn't expect. "Was it," Caleb began carefully, "something I said earlier?" Ethan gave a small embarrassed laugh. "Maybe." Caleb sat straighter, concern flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't." Ethan walked to the side of the bed and sat on the edge. I don't know. It felt big. Like you meant something more." Caleb's expression softened, almost painfully gentle. "I did." Silence settled between them, warm and charged. Ethan swallowed. "Why me?" Caleb studied him for a moment before answering. "Because you have a way of looking at the world like it's still full of hope. And maybe I needed that more than I realized." Ethan felt the air shift again, that same unspoken pull from earlier growing stronger. He leaned forward without meaning to, elbows resting on his knees. "So earlier," Ethan said quietly, "when you said I was special, you meant it?" "With every part of me," Caleb replied in a whisper. Something fluttered in Ethan's chest, confusion mixed with warmth. Caleb wasn't a stranger. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't crossing any lines. He was simply being honest in a way adults rarely were with someone Ethan's age. Ethan breathed in slowly. "Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why do you look at me like that?" Caleb's lips parted, then pressed together again. He seemed to wrestle with himself before answering. "Because," he said, voice low, "I care about you. More than I should let myself." Ethan's breath caught. There it was, the unspoken truth finally given shape. "You're not upset?" Caleb asked carefully. Ethan shook his head. "No. Just surprised." Caleb's gaze softened. "I would never make you uncomfortable, Ethan. I hope you know that." "I do," Ethan whispered. There was a long pause where neither moved. The room felt warm, quiet, intimate without crossing any lines. Ethan let his fingers brush the edge of Caleb's blanket absent-mindedly. "Caleb?" he murmured. "Yes." "Earlier, when you asked if I trusted you, why did you ask that?" Caleb inhaled slowly. "Because trust is the only thing that matters in moments like this." "In what moment?" "This one," Caleb said gently, watching him with an honesty so raw it made Ethan's heart skip. Ethan didn't know what he expected to feel: fear, confusion, embarrassment, but none of those came. Instead, he felt drawn in by the sincerity of someone who clearly struggled to hold back emotions for the sake of doing the right thing. "I don't mind the way you look at me," Ethan said quietly. Caleb blinked, stunned. "You don't?" "No. It feels nice." A shaky breath escaped Caleb. "Ethan, you're kind. Kinder than you know." Something inside Ethan unfolded like a slow-burning flame. He scooted closer, not touching, just close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Caleb's voice barely carried. "You should sleep." "Here?" Ethan asked before thinking. Caleb froze. "If you want to." "I do," Ethan admitted softly. Caleb hesitated, then moved aside, giving him space. Ethan climbed onto the bed, lying on top of the covers. Caleb stayed still, breathing carefully, clearly trying not to make anything uncomfortable. The lamp stayed on, dim and warm. Ethan turned his head toward Caleb. "You said the world feels lighter when I'm here." Caleb nodded slowly. Ethan smiled, shy but sincere. I feel lighter here too." Caleb's expression softened with something deep, something tenderly restrained. "Good night, Ethan," he whispered. "Good night." As Ethan closed his eyes, he felt Caleb's presence close, warm, protective. No lines were crossed. No words were needed. Just two souls resting in the quiet space where attraction meets trust. And somewhere in the stillness, a feeling stirred, gentle, uncertain, but real. Something that would only grow stronger in the days to come. The night had a strange way of holding secrets. Ethan felt it as he rested beside Caleb, both of them lying on top of the blankets, separated by a breath of space that felt far heavier than centimeters. The lamp glowed softly through the room, casting warm shadows on the walls like silent witnesses. Ethan wasn't asleep, not even close. His eyes were closed, but his mind was awake, replaying every word, every pause, every careful breath Caleb had taken. He had never seen someone so cautious with their feelings. So afraid of stepping over a line. So deliberate. And yet, so real. Caleb thought he was asleep, and that made it easier to whisper truths into the quiet. Ethan heard him shift slightly as if rolling onto his side. He felt the mattress dip gently. A moment of silence. Then a soft, barely audible confession slipped into the air. "I wish you knew how much you mean to me." Ethan's heart thudded hard. He almost opened his eyes, almost turned toward him, but he didn't. Something told him to stay still, to let Caleb speak whatever he'd held inside for too long. "You're young," Caleb continued in a whisper, voice trembling with restraint, "and I don't want to hurt you, or confuse you. But God, Ethan, I care. Too much." Ethan's throat tightened. Those words, spoken so quietly, carried an honesty that sank deep. No one had ever cared about him with that much sincerity before, not in that way. Caleb exhaled shakily, like someone bearing the weight of unspoken feelings. "I'll protect you from everything. Even from me if I have to." Ethan's eyes opened slowly. He turned his head just an inch. Caleb froze. Their eyes met. A soft, startled moment passed. Caleb's lips parted slightly, the breath leaving his chest in a silent confession of surprise and vulnerability. "You're awake," he whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "I heard everything." Color flushed across Caleb's face, embarrassment mixed with fear, mixed with something Ethan recognized now, longing. "I shouldn't have said any of that," Caleb murmured, looking away. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," Ethan said gently, shifting closer. "Please don't." Caleb blinked, stunned. "You aren't upset?" Ethan shook his head, offering a smile so small and soft it could break something inside a person. "I've never had someone care about me that deeply." Caleb swallowed, trying and failing to hide his emotions. "Ethan, you don't understand." "Then help me understand," Ethan whispered. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with unspoken truths neither of them had the courage to articulate completely. Caleb turned toward him slowly, carefully, as if Ethan were something fragile he didn't want to break. His hand lifted, hovered near Ethan's cheek, then pulled away again out of fear. "You can?" Ethan whispered. Caleb's brows drew together. "Can what?" "Touch me," Ethan said softly, voice steady. "It's okay." Caleb's breath trembled. This wasn't a moment of impulse, it was a moment of trust. A moment built from gentle looks, careful words, and the safety they had created between them. His fingertips brushed Ethan's cheek. Lightly. Reverently. As if asking permission with every millimeter. Ethan leaned into the touch. Caleb closed his eyes, emotion flooding his expression. "You're going to undo me?" he whispered. "But I trust you," Ethan replied. Their foreheads touched, a soft, intimate gesture that said more than a kiss ever could. Caleb's hand rested along Ethan's jaw, thumb brushing lightly over his skin in a way that made Ethan's heart flutter. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," Caleb breathed. Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I do." Caleb opened his eyes, meeting Ethan's gaze with a look that was tender, conflicted, and deeply drawn. "This is dangerous," he whispered. Ethan's voice was gentle but sure. "Then be careful with me." Caleb exhaled, his resolve breaking inch by inch. He leaned in, not kissing him, not crossing the line, just letting the distance shrink until their lips hovered close enough for Ethan to feel the warmth of his breath. It was a moment suspended between desire and restraint. A moment where 1,000 things could happen. And Caleb stopped himself. He pulled back just an inch, enough to show he was still holding on to the boundaries he believed were necessary. "I need to know you're not confused," he said softly. "I'm not," Ethan whispered. "You're sure? I'm here, aren't I?" Caleb closed his eyes again, fighting a losing battle with his own feelings. "Ethan, if we let this continue, it changes everything." Ethan's voice was barely audible. "I want it to." The room felt warmer. The air heavier. The emotional closeness between them had reached a point where even silence felt intimate. Caleb lay down beside him again, this time closer. Close enough that their shoulders touched, close enough that Ethan could feel his heartbeat through the mattress. "Then stay tonight," Caleb murmured, voice husky with restrained affection. "Just stay." "I will." They didn't kiss. They didn't cross any forbidden lines. But Ethan slid his hand across the space between them and rested it beside Caleb's, close enough for their fingers to brush, close enough for both of them to feel the electricity of almost, but not yet. Caleb laced their fingers together slowly, gently. And for Ethan, that simple act felt more intimate than anything else ever could. The lamp dimmed. The night deepened. And in the quiet safety of that room, something undeniable took root, a bond neither of them could retreat from anymore. When they drifted to sleep, their hands stayed intertwined. And by morning, everything between them would be different. Sunlight crept through the half-open curtains, soft and golden, warming the room as morning slowly unfolded. It danced across the wooden floor, climbed the bed frame, and finally brushed across Ethan's face. He shifted a little, groggy but content, feeling warmth beside him, the kind that didn't come from blankets. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then he opened his eyes. Caleb was lying inches away, still asleep. And their hands were still intertwined. Ethan's breath caught. Not in fear, but in a quiet, fluttering warmth that spread through his chest. No dream had ever felt this real, this grounding, this peaceful. Caleb looked softer in sleep. Younger somehow. Like someone who had spent years building walls and was finally allowed to rest. Ethan watched him for a moment, taking in the rise and fall of his breathing, the way the sunlight grazed his jawline, the slight crease between his brows that softened with each breath. His thumb brushed lightly over Caleb's hand. Caleb stirred. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light, then to Ethan. For a heartbeat he looked confused, and then the memory returned. His expression softened instantly, like morning sunlight finding its way across a cold room. "Good morning," Caleb said quietly. Ethan smiled. "Good morning." There was a long pause, not awkward, just thoughtful. Caleb looked down at their joined hands, still resting between them on the bed. "Did you mean to keep holding on?" Caleb asked softly. "Yeah," Ethan said with a small, shy grin. "Did you?" Caleb exhaled a quiet laugh, almost embarrassed. "I guess I didn't want to let go." Ethan's smile grew. But reality had a way of creeping back in. Caleb sat up slowly, running a hand through his messy hair as if grounding himself again. "Ethan," he said gently, "we should talk about last night." Ethan sat up too, leaning back on his hands. "Okay." Caleb looked hesitant. Not because he regretted it, but because he cared enough to worry. "I need to know you're not just going along with this because it feels nice. Because of the moment." "Caleb," Ethan said softly, "I stayed because I wanted to." Caleb searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. He found none. "But I don't want you to feel pressured," Caleb continued carefully. "You're young. You're figuring things out. I don't want to be the reason you make choices you later question." "You're not," Ethan said firmly. His voice held a confidence that surprised both of them. Caleb blinked, taken aback. "Ethan." "I know what I feel," Ethan insisted. "Maybe I'm young, but I'm not confused. I know when something feels right." Caleb's breath faltered. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mason was still asleep somewhere downstairs, unaware of the emotional storm unfolding above. Ethan shifted closer, closing the gap between them inch by inch until their shoulders touched. Last night wasn't a mistake. Caleb inhaled sharply, eyes softening, almost melting. "You have no idea how dangerous it is for me to want to believe that." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then believe it anyway." Caleb's resolve cracked again, just like the night before. His hand slowly lifted, brushing Ethan's hair away from his forehead in a gesture so tender it felt like a confession. "You're going to undo every bit of restraint I have," Caleb whispered. "Maybe I want to," Ethan replied. Caleb laughed under his breath, a warm, disbelieving sound. "You're impossible. And you're scared," Ethan said gently. You think caring about me is wrong. Caleb looked away. Not wrong. Just complicated. Ethan leaned his shoulder against Caleb's again. Then we deal with complicated. A long silence followed, thoughtful and heavy with emotion. Caleb finally exhaled. I don't want to hide what I feel. But I also don't want to move too fast. I need to know you're choosing this with a clear mind. I am. And you're not doing this because you feel flattered? I'm doing this because when I look at you, nothing feels confusing. Caleb pressed his lips together, unsure how to respond. Emotion pooled in his eyes, something raw, something grateful, something overwhelmed. Ethan watched him quietly, waiting. When Caleb finally spoke, his voice was soft, trembling. You make it very hard to stay careful. Ethan whispered, then don't be. Caleb's hand lifted again, hovering near Ethan's cheek, waiting for permission. Ethan leaned in, giving it. Caleb cupped his face gently as if holding something precious. Their foreheads touched again, a warm, intimate point of connection that made Ethan's breath hitch. Their lips were inches apart. Too close. Too tempting. Caleb pulled back with a shaky breath. If I kiss you, everything changes. Ethan met his eyes. Then change it. Something in Caleb finally gave in, not crossing into anything explicit, but allowing what had been building for days to finally breathe. He leaned forward and pressed a soft, slow kiss to Ethan's forehead. Ethan closed his eyes, warmth flooding through him. It wasn't a mouth-to-mouth kiss. It wasn't crossing the line. But it was deep, intimate, meaningful. When Caleb pulled back, his voice shook with emotion. You matter to me in ways I can't hide anymore. Ethan whispered, you matter to me too. A quiet knock echoed from the hallway. Mason's groggy voice called, Ethan? Caleb? You guys up? They froze. Caleb mouthed, later. Ethan nodded. They slipped apart slightly, not because they regretted the moment but because they knew they needed privacy for what was growing between them. Come in, Caleb called, steadying his voice. Mason pushed the door open, yawning. Breakfast. Yeah, Caleb said, standing. We'll be down in a minute. Mason left without noticing anything unusual. But Caleb turned back to Ethan, unable to hide the softness in his eyes. This isn't over, he whispered. Ethan smiled. I hope not. As Caleb walked out of the room, Ethan stayed behind for a moment, touching the spot on his forehead where Caleb's lips had been. A place that felt changed forever. The rest of the morning passed with a quiet tension that neither Ethan nor Caleb dared to name aloud. Breakfast felt strangely normal. Pancakes on mismatched plates, Mason talking about school, Caleb pretending to focus, Ethan sneaking glances from across the table. But beneath the surface, the night before pulsed like a secret heartbeat. Every time Ethan met Caleb's eyes, something warm flickered between them. Something real. Something that demanded to be acknowledged even in a room where it had to stay hidden. After breakfast, Mason announced he was heading to a friend's house across town. Be back by evening, he said, grabbing his jacket. Caleb tried not to react. Ethan tried not to react. But when the front door closed and the house settled back into stillness, the silence between them deepened instantly. They were alone. Caleb cleared his throat. Do you want tea? Ethan smiled softly. Sure. Caleb exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all morning. They went to the kitchen. The room smelled like sunshine and lemon dish soap, the wooden floor warming beneath their feet. Caleb prepared tea with slow, deliberate movements as if trying to steady himself. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching him. You're quiet, Caleb said finally. So are you, Ethan replied. Caleb handed him a cup. Their fingers brushed. Barely a second, but enough to make Caleb still completely, eyes flicking up. The tension built again, slow and careful. I've been thinking, Caleb said. About what? About us. His voice lowered. About last night. Ethan's chest tightened. And? Caleb set his cup down, turning to face him fully. I want to be honest with you. Completely honest. His eyes softened, almost vulnerable. I've been trying to keep distance for a long time. But I'm not doing a very good job anymore. Ethan's breath hitched. I don't want distance. Caleb smiled, sad and warm. I know. And that's what scares me. Ethan stepped closer, voice steady. You don't have to be scared around me. Caleb looked at him with an expression that melted into emotion, one he couldn't hide anymore. You say that like you understand everything I'm feeling. Ethan shrugged gently. Maybe I do. Caleb laughed under his breath. You're too young to carry this much certainty. And you're too careful to see something good when it's right in front of you, Ethan replied quietly. That silenced Caleb. Ethan took another small step closer. Last night when you touched me, it didn't confuse me. It didn't scare me. It made me feel safe. Caleb swallowed hard. Ethan. I mean it, Ethan whispered. A moment passed, warm, heavy, intimate. Caleb's resolve cracked again just a little. Come with me, he said gently. He led Ethan into the living room. Afternoon sunlight filtered in through the windows, bathing the room in soft gold. Caleb stood near the couch, looking at Ethan with an honesty that stripped away every wall he had left. I need you to know something, Caleb said. If we keep going, I can't treat this lightly. I won't. I don't want light, Ethan said. I want real. Caleb inhaled shakily. Then you need to understand what you're choosing. Ethan folded his arms. Then tell me. Caleb looked at him for a long moment, trying to find the right words. I haven't cared about someone like this in years. I didn't expect it. I didn't want it at first. But you walked into this house and something shifted. Ethan's heart pounded. Shifted how? You made the house feel alive again, Caleb said softly. You made me feel alive again. Ethan felt something warm and powerful swirl through him. Caleb stepped closer, not too close but enough for Ethan to feel the warmth of him. I care about you, Caleb whispered. In a way that terrifies me. Ethan's voice was barely above a breath. Then stop fighting it. Caleb closed his eyes, wrestling with the last pieces of restraint he still held onto. When he opened them again, his expression had changed, softer, open, filled with something deep and undeniable. He lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately. Ethan didn't move. Caleb touched his face, gently, thumb brushing his cheekbone. Ethan leaned into the touch instinctively. Caleb whispered, You're going to make me cross every line I swore I wouldn't. Then cross them carefully, Ethan whispered back. It was the permission Caleb had been afraid to seek but desperately needed. His other hand came up, resting lightly on Ethan's neck, warm and protective. Ethan's breath trembled. Caleb leaned closer, slow, intentional, stopping only when their foreheads touched again. This time the moment felt heavier. Like something inside both of them had been building for far too long. You're shaking, Ethan whispered. So are you, Caleb replied quietly. Their breath mingled, warm and intimate. Caleb's fingers traced the line of Ethan's jaw with reverence, almost trembling. Then, for the first time, he let his lips touch Ethan's. Not a deep kiss. Not a bold kiss. Just a soft, careful, lingering contact, enough to send warmth flooding through both of them. Ethan's breath caught. His hand slid onto Caleb's chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath his shirt. Caleb pulled back just an inch, whispering, This is the line. And I chose it, Ethan murmured. Caleb closed his eyes, forehead resting against Ethan's. You're going to make me fall apart. Then fall, Ethan whispered. Caleb kissed him again, soft, warm, slow. A kiss full of feelings, full of restraint, full of everything he had held back for far too long. When he finally pulled away, breathing unsteady, he pressed his forehead to Ethan's shoulder and exhaled shakily. I want you, Caleb whispered. More than I should. Ethan gently touched the back of his head. Then want me. Caleb laughed quietly, breathless. You make everything sound so simple. Ethan smiled. Maybe it is. Caleb lifted his head, cupping Ethan's face again with both hands, eyes filled with tenderness and conflict and longing. Stay with me today, Caleb said softly. Just us. Ethan whispered, I will. And as the sunlight warmed the room, Caleb pulled Ethan into a slow, close embrace, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Their walls were falling. And neither of them wanted to stop it anymore. A deep stillness settled over the house by the time Ethan pushed open the half-closed door of Marcus's room. The old place usually creaked at night, the kind of sounds you could hear even through conversation. But tonight, the silence felt intentional, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. A soft lamp glowed on Marcus's nightstand, casting amber light across the room, warming the edges of every shadow. Ethan stepped inside slowly, unsure why his heartbeat felt so loud in his ears. Marcus looked up from where he sat at the corner of his bed, elbows resting on his knees. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened with something Ethan couldn't name, something quiet, careful, and full of meaning. You came, Marcus said gently. You asked me to, Ethan replied, closing the door behind him. The faint click sounded like the sealing of a secret. Ethan stood there for a moment, hands stuffed nervously into his pockets, trying to read Marcus's expression. It wasn't the playful teasing from the living room, nor the affectionate glances Ethan had tried to ignore these past days. Tonight Marcus looked vulnerable. And Ethan wasn't used to seeing that from a man who always carried himself with such certainty. "Sit," Marcus said, patting the space next to him on the bed. Ethan hesitated only a second before walking across the room and lowering himself beside Marcus. The mattress dipped slightly with their combined weight, closing the distance between their shoulders. Ethan stared forward for a long moment, focusing on the small lamp instead of the warmth he could feel radiating from Marcus's body. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I need to tell you something." Ethan turned to him. "Okay. It might change things," Marcus warned. Ethan swallowed. "Between us. Between everything." The air tightened. Ethan felt his pulse skip. Marcus looked down at his hands. "All these days I've been trying to keep things light. Jokes, teasing, acting casual. I didn't want to confuse you. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable in my house." His voice dropped lower, almost breaking. "But I also didn't want to lie." Ethan shifted closer unconsciously. "Marcus, what are you trying to say?" Marcus looked up, meeting his eyes with a kind of honesty that left no space to hide. "I care about you, Ethan. More than I should. More than I expected to. And I know, it's complicated. You're my nephew's friend. You're young. You didn't come here expecting any of this." He paused. "But my feelings, they're real." The confession fell into the quiet room like a stone into deep water, rippling out, touching every corner of Ethan's thoughts. Ethan inhaled softly. I didn't know you felt that way." Marcus smiled faintly. "I know. I tried not to show it. And then I failed at that too." Ethan looked at him, studying the lines of his face, lines shaped by worry, hope, fear all blending together. Marcus wasn't a man who confessed easily. He carried himself like someone who'd been disappointed enough times to guard his heart fiercely. Yet here he was, eyes exposed, waiting for the answer of someone he had no reason to trust. Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. "Why me?" Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "As if I could explain it. You walk in with that smile, with that softness in your voice, with that way of looking at the world, like it's still something worth discovering. You don't pretend to be someone else. You just are." His voice thickened. "And you make me remember parts of myself I thought I'd lost." Ethan's breath caught. He wasn't used to being seen like that. Not so clearly. Not so deeply. Marcus turned his face away slightly. "And if you tell me to stop, if you want distance, I'll give it to you. No questions. No pressure." His shoulders tensed. "I just needed you to know the truth. Even if it ruins everything." Ethan stared at him, stunned by the weight of the moment. He felt the fragility in Marcus's words, felt how much courage it had taken to speak them. And deep inside, something warm unfurled in his chest, something he'd been trying to ignore, or maybe something he hadn't understood until now. Slowly, Ethan reached out and placed his hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus froze. "Hey," Ethan murmured. "You didn't ruin anything." Marcus turned toward him, eyes uncertain. Ethan's voice was gentle. "I care about you too. I don't know where it came from. I don't know when it started. But it's there. And tonight, I wanted to be here. With you." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, like the words physically touched him. When he opened them again, they were softer. Warmer. More hopeful. Ethan shifted closer until their knees brushed. "You don't have to explain the future," Ethan whispered. "We don't have to label anything right now. But I want this moment. With you." Marcus's breath trembled. "Ethan." Ethan lifted a hand and cupped Marcus's jaw gently, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble under his palm. Marcus leaned into the touch instinctively, a quiet exhale escaping him. Ethan drew closer, slow and deliberate, giving Marcus time to pull away. "You didn't?" Their lips met with the kind of hesitant tenderness that made the world outside the room fade into insignificance. It wasn't urgent or rushed. It was slow, warm, meaningful. Marcus deepened the kiss softly, as though afraid Ethan might vanish if he moved too fast. When they parted, foreheads resting together, Ethan whispered, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere tonight." Marcus exhaled shakily, relief flooding his features. He stood, extended a hand, and Ethan took it. Marcus guided him toward the bed, the gesture gentle, not demanding. Ethan's heart thudded as they settled together under the soft lamplight. Marcus brushed a thumb over Ethan's cheek, his touch steady, reverent. "You're sure?" Marcus asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." Marcus pulled him close, their bodies fitting naturally, as if this moment had been waiting for them all along. Their lips met again, deeper, slower, and the warmth between them grew until the rest of the world slipped away. The lamp remained on, casting a protective glow as the room filled with whispered breaths, soft laughter, and quiet confessions meant for no one but each other. Soft morning light spilled through the thin curtains, turning the room a pale gold. It was the kind of sunlight that arrived quietly, like a guest who didn't want to disturb anyone. Ethan blinked awake to its warmth grazing his face. For a moment he didn't move. He simply breathed, wrapped in the calm that only exists in the minutes before the world fully wakes. Then he became aware of the arm loosely draped around his waist. Ethan turned his head slightly and found Marcus beside him, still asleep. His features looked softer in the morning, less guarded, less serious. The man who had spent the last few days teasing him, challenging him, confessing to him now lay in a quiet, peaceful stillness that made Ethan's chest ache in a way he wasn't prepared for. He watched Marcus breathe for a few seconds, slow and steady. Last night felt like both a dream and a turning point, one of those rare moments in life where everything shifts, even if the world outside doesn't know it yet. Ethan didn't regret it. Not a single second. A gentle smile tugged at his lips. Marcus stirred, eyelashes fluttering before he opened his eyes halfway. A sleepy, warm confusion crossed his face for a split second, until he saw Ethan. Then he smiled. A small, shy, genuine smile. "Good morning," Marcus said, voice thick with sleep. "Morning," Ethan whispered back. They lay there, facing each other in the quiet glow of morning, neither rushing to fill the silence. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't complicated. It was comforting. Marcus sighed softly. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I be?" Marcus hesitated. "Because sometimes people regret big moments when the sun comes up." Ethan reached out and lightly traced his fingertips along Marcus's hand. "Not me. Not this." Marcus's expression shifted. Relief, warmth, something deeper. "Good," he whispered. "I'm glad." For a while they simply lay there, close enough that Ethan could feel the heat of Marcus's breath on his skin. The world felt impossibly small, contained entirely within the four walls of that room. But eventually reality nudged at the edges. Time didn't stop even if Ethan wished it would. Marcus pushed himself up slightly, resting on his elbow. "We need to talk about what happens now." Ethan stared up at the ceiling. "Yeah, I know. It's not that I want to complicate things," Marcus said gently. "But you're important to me. And I want to do this right." Ethan turned toward him. "What are you thinking?" Marcus looked like he was choosing his words carefully. "I don't want this to be a secret full of guilt. But I also don't want to rush you, or push you into anything you're not ready for." Ethan nodded slowly. "I get that. And," Marcus continued softly, "I want you to know you can walk away anytime if you feel confused or unsure. I won't be angry. I won't blame you." Ethan sat up too, sitting cross-legged on the bed. "Marcus, I'm not confused." Marcus blinked, surprised. "I don't know everything yet," Ethan admitted. "I don't know what this means for the future or for your nephew or for us. But I know what I felt last night. And I know what I feel this morning." He placed his hand over Marcus's chest, feeling the slow, solid heartbeat beneath. "And that's enough for me right now." Marcus covered Ethan's hand with his own and leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. It wasn't heated like the night before. It was tender, steady, full of affection and unspoken promises. "Then we start slow," Marcus murmured. "No pressure. Just us." Ethan nodded. "Just us." He glanced around the room, now bright with the late morning sun. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. Marcus sat back against the headboard, stretching slightly. "You hungry?" Ethan laughed softly. "Starving." Marcus smirked. "Figures. Last night probably used up all your energy." Ethan shoved him lightly with a pillow. "Stop." Marcus caught the pillow easily, grinning. "What?" "I'm just saying." Ethan rolled his eyes, but the warmth on his face gave him away. They got out of bed reluctantly, both still moving through the gentle haze of the morning after. Ethan watched Marcus pull on a simple shirt, noticing the ease with which he carried himself now. The tension that had weighed on him for days, fear, uncertainty, hesitation, was gone. Downstairs the house was quiet. Marcus's nephew wasn't home yet, and the silence felt like a small gift. Marcus moved around the kitchen, making coffee with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Ethan sat on the counter, swinging his legs, watching him with quiet fondness. "You're staring," Marcus said without looking up. "You're imagining it." Marcus snorted. "Sure." Ethan hopped down, stepping closer. "Hey." Marcus turned toward him, coffee mug in one hand, warm smile on his face. "I like this," Ethan said softly. Being here. With you. Marcus's eyes softened. Me too. They stood there for a moment, the distance between them closing naturally. Marcus leaned down and brushed a soft kiss against Ethan's cheek. Nothing intense, just a gesture filled with gratitude and quiet devotion. Ethan's heart fluttered. Breakfast was simple, coffee, toast, laughter that came easily. They talked about ordinary things, letting the simplicity of the moment ground them. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complicated. It was real. As they finished eating, Ethan glanced toward the window. Your nephew will be back soon. Marcus nodded. Yeah. And we don't have to tell him anything today. Or tomorrow. Or anytime soon. Ethan exhaled, relieved. Good. Marcus reached out and squeezed his hand. But one day, when we're ready, we'll tell him. Together. Ethan felt something steady settle in his chest. Something like trust. He squeezed back. Together. The morning light slipped higher, brightening the kitchen. Ethan looked around the house that had become something unexpected. A place of discovery, of truth, of new beginnings. And he realized he wasn't afraid of what came next. Not anymore. Marcus stepped closer again, lowering his voice. So, you staying for breakfast tomorrow too? Ethan laughed. If you cook something better than toast. Oh, I can do better, Marcus said, smirking. Much better. Ethan shook his head with a smile. We'll see. Marcus reached out, brushing his hand gently against Ethan's jaw. Whatever happens. I'm glad you walked into this house. Ethan leaned into the touch. Me too. They stood there in the warm glow of morning, two hearts changed, two lives quietly intertwined, ready to face whatever came next.